Oh, it's okay. It's okay. It's okay. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much once again. Welcome that little distraction and commercial break. So once again, thank you. If you can follow me, if you can hear me, I want you to drop your favorite emoji. Thank you so much, Doreen. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And thank you so much. Okay, I'm going to ask a question. What? Uh, hmm, okay, let me keep it in the middle of the class. I'll ask the question. So back to what we discussed in our last class. I said we talked about selector in our last class. We discussed what selectors are, why it's necessary to use selectors. We also discussed on how the importance of CSS selectors. We also looked at how to implement the different method of integrating CSS to our HTML. We looked at that in our last class, and we focused more on CSS selectors, the patterns for selectors, how the core concept of selector, and which we say that the selectors are a core concept of CSS because they allow you to pinpoint exactly which elements should be affected by your style, which is basic, and the core thing of selector is to pinpoint the exact selector, the exact element that you want to be affected by your style. Then we looked at different types of selector, the different ways, the types of selector. We looked at the type selectors, which is also known as the element selector or tag selector. We also saw how to implement that in our CSS. We also looked at class selector. Also looked at the method, which we said class selectors on our CSS file is always is is preceded with a dot. Once you see a dot before your CSS selector, it shows that you are using a class selector, and you use your class attributes on your HTML. Then in your CSS file, you precede this class name with a dot. Then we talked about the ID selector. We looked at the importance of the ID selectors and the unique thing about the ID selectors, which we also make sure and noted that the ID selector should be unique within a page because it can is best used for a specific task, which I showed you different ways you could use it if you were building a single page website, how you could use your ID attributes and ID selectors to scroll through the page just with your navigation. We talked about that. Then we discussed how to use ID selectors in your CSS, which we have that your in your ID selector, using an ID selector, you precede your ID name with the hash symbol, the pound symbol. So we use hash, or you call it hash, or we call it pound. So depending on how you call it, but that's the same thing we use it for to precede our ID name, the name that we use in our ID. So that's for ID selectors. Then we talked about universal selector. So we also looked at how universal selector was. It affects every selector in the web page, no matter what it is, except that element has a specific style added to it. The CSS, the universal selector affects every element. Only if and I also mentioned that CSS has what we call importance. When your any if you have a style that is directly to just that single element, your universal selector does not override that. We also saw that in the sample that we did during the class too. Then we also looked at attribute selector. Attribute selector. So looked at attribute selector, how we could use attribute selector. We also looked at attribute selectors, how we could implement attribute selectors in our CSS, which we also test run and saw how it worked. Then we also discuss this also discuss about selector, descendant selectors, which allows you to target the nested elements that is nested inside other elements. So that's going to be. So we looked at how to implement that, we test run that, we saw how it works, and we also discussed child selectors, and we also saw the difference between descendant selectors and child selector, which style selector is similar to descendant, but it's more specific. Just that's the difference. And we also saw the difference because in child selector we use a, an angle bracket to indicate the selector. Then while in descendant, just do that without an angle bracket. Then we also looked at adjacent sibling selector where you use blocks, and the difference between adjacent selectors and the child selector with the descendant selector, which we see that the adjacent sibling selector targets the element that is immediately preceded by another element. So we we experimented that with using a div where we have our h1 that is preceded with a paragraph. So we tested on it as well how it works, which we all did in our last class. Then um, basically that's where we stop. So we are going to continue with that to see that we complete that. The next one we have, the next selector we have on the line is the general sibling selector. The general sibling selector. All right, I want to believe you all can hear me. If you could hear me and if you are following, I want you to on the comment section which selector, how to implement uh, the ID selector, how to implement the ID selector in your CSS. What do you use to implement your ID selector in your CSS? All right, thank you so much. I could see 3 persons. All right. Since we are following, then okay, how to implement taking notes of the fastest finger, how to implement the adjacent sibling selector how to implement that in our CSS. How to implement adjacent sibling selector. Adjacent sibling selector. So I'm seeing a lot of hands, a lot of comments. That's all right. Okay, just 2 persons. Wow, just 2 persons. I see, I see. All right. Okay. I'm seeing a lot of mathematics. I'm seeing a lot of mathematics going on. That's okay. So I'm taking my screenshot now for those that answered. Okay. All right. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for that wonderful icebreaker. Back to what we have for tonight. We are starting with the next selector that we have, line, which is the general sibling selector. The general sibling selector targets all elements that are siblings of a specific element. So this we use the I'm sorry for that. I'm sorry for that. Sorry for that. If you are having network issues, try to log out and join the call again. Your network will become more stronger and you could hear us and see this at my screen. Thank you so much. So back to what we have, we said the general selector targets all elements that are siblings of a specific element. It's written with a diader. Then we use H1 using, okay. If you, okay, I want to know, not everybody actually knows where you could find this symbol in your system. So just look closely to your top left side of your keyboard. You will find this symbol there. So you don't need to look for it. So this element targets all paragraphs that are siblings of a H1 element. So the snippet that we have here shows that all paragraphs that are siblings to H1 is affected by this code that we have here, this piece of. So in our code, all the paragraphs that is the p tag contents that is precede that comes immediately after a H1 takes up this style that we added here. So what is the difference between this general selector, the general sibling selector, and the adjacent sibling selector? Looking at it, they do almost the same thing, but what is the major difference? What's the difference between the two? Who is answering? Who has the answer to this? Florence, you can go ahead.
Okay, good evening, sir. I think okay, the adjacent sibling we only apply to the one, like the one probably we have like H1, then inside we have like a div. Inside the div we have H1 and a P. So if we should use the adjacent only applies to the one after the H1, which is P. But if we should use like general siblings, even if the p is not adjacent, if it's right after, if it's the first element that comes up, it will still affect it. I don't know if you understand what I'm trying to say.
Sorry, can you go recap on that again?
Okay, I said the adjacent now. Like the adjacent will only affect the p that is adjacent another element. Why the
And then
general selector, even if the p is like, okay, let me use child, father and grandfather now. Even if the p is like a child inside um inside a container, ah, god, oh, I give up.
thank you so much. Yes, the difference adjacent uses plus does in the aspect of using it. Adjacent uses a plus sign while the sibling uses a title. So now the key function difference is that both of them uses both of them uses preceding elements, but the difference is adjacent only affects the preceding element, while in general sibling selector affects all preceding elements that has that same format. If you use that, say in your code, your CSS, you define that all p tag that are preceding, sorry, all p tag that comes immediately after your h1 is, you want it to have a background color of red. Now that's for general. Why adjacent with the same code but the difference of sign, adjacent is an only that single one that precedes that takes it. So the elements that is being targeted, so the h1 and the paragraph tag p tag that comes after h1 takes up that style. So we look at the next one, Fuso class selectors. Fuso class selectors, you are going to be using this mostly frequently, and all around is, so Fuso class selectors allows you to target elements based on their state and position. The state and position, what do we mean by that? State and position. Now, in state means, state in programming, state means an occurrence. What a state, like what is the current being of that person, whether you are running or you are jumping or you are sitting or you are listening or you are just there. That's a state. So future class selectors allows you to target elements based on their state or position. So the very first one we have here is hover. Hover hover targets an element when the user hovers on it. So until the user hovers on that element, that action is not, there is no, the CSS does not affect that until that happens. Then the end child targets an element based on its position within the parent element. So if you, according to mathematics, we know that the end term is, we get to know about that, the end term. So if using the knowledge of the basic mathematics about the end term, that's the same way it applies here. So when it targets the element based on its position within the parent element. So according to the position of the parent element. According to the element's position within that element that is containing it, that's the parent element. So that's how you get that. Then we have the focus. The focus is another event button. If in JavaScript we call it events. So whereby only when that element is being focused is almost the same way as hover, but the difference is when it's being focused, just like your input on your input, or when you click on something, when you click on a button or you click on a tag, it it picks up the style. Then when you just drop your mouse, hover your cursor on top of that element, it picks up the style. That's for hover. Then for focus is when you click on it or you tap on it, it takes up that action. So the example we have here is example of a hover. When the button, this is when you button is hovered. When you hover on a button, the background color changes to light gray. So the color initially is going to have, let's say we have a button of yellow, then we now add a Visual class saying that when the button is hovered, the background color should be light gray. So it takes up the style once it's been hovered. Then we have so that is for Fuso class selectors. Then we have the 11th one, which is Fuso element selectors. Fuso element selectors target specific part of an element. The common ones is before. So what happen? How this works is before the content, do this. Before, after the content, do this. That's basically the how this works. Before this, do this. Before, after this, do that. So what we have there is that before means it's going to insert the whatever the styling that you have before that content, before the content of your H1. From the sample we have here, before the content of H1, we are adding something to it. We're adding a property of content, and we are adding this content to that. Then after, if we change this to after, means after the content of the H1, you now have this, you now add up this. Means the before means before the content is, if let's say in front, let's say they are on the stem line, is they are on a queue. So when you use before means before the content, that's the main content of that, it should, this should happen. Then after the content, this guy should stand there. Before the content, this guy should stand here. That's basically how this works. So I'm going to launch this code and let's run it. Then we go in for what we have. I'm going to do this before I take few questions. Then we go in for a very important aspect of CSS. If you have any question, drop it on the comment section, or you can also drop it on the group. You can raise your hand, signify, then I could ask you to unmute yourself and take your question. Okay, Priska has a question.
Yes, I do. Good evening. Good evening. Can you hear me? Can you hear
Yes,
me?
go ahead.
So the question, the answer to this question will require for me to ask the next question. So concerning all the selectors we talk about, would it be a situation where they would like will be taught the implementation of each of them, each of the kinds? Like let's say this selector is just a real life situation where it is being used, or we write the code together and then see it being used. So it's just
Sorry,
something like that going to happen.
I didn't actually get your question.
Either you didn't hear me or you didn't understand it. Okay.
Hear me better now.
Yes, yes.
Okay. So I was saying, is this situation where for these selectors now, will a situation come up where we'll be shown how they are being used, each of them? Like for example, the selector, you show us a real life situation where it's being practically used, or we'll write the code together in one of the sections. That's what I wanted to know.
We have actually practiced, or we are about to look into the visual selector, visual element selector, and the visual class selector, then the general sibling selector, which the elements, that was actually what we are about to do. So,
Okay. Okay. I think that's good. Thank you.
all right, I'm going to explain the visual element selector and the visual class selector. This, if you look at the name, visual class selector and visual element selector, I'm going to explain these two. So back to our CSS, we have buttons on our HTML on our code. So I'm going to add buttons and add hover. So we have a lot of visual class selectors where we have a list of them. If you use VS codes, just like I do, you will, once you put it up, you can get a whole lot of them to see for yourself and use. So that being said, we have the after, which is a visual element. You notice that they use for visual elements, there is use double columns, while for visual class you use just a single column. That being said, let's look in.
Sir, please, have you started sharing your screen?
I have been sharing my screen since I started the class. Sorry, you could log out and log in again to see my screen. I think your network is quite bad.
Okay, sir.
All right, thank you so much. So that being said, we look at Hoover. So like I said, for Hoover, once a button is hovered, you will they call background color of red. Let's use red. Now let's go to our code. So once I hover on the button, the background color changes Then I made mention of something before now. I said um when I did mention about the hover, when I did mention about the physical class selectors, I talked about the states and position. It works with event. That means something must trigger it. So those are for physical selectors, physical class or physical element selectors. It has to, for physical class selectors, it has to be triggered by something. Is always like taking up a action is based on targets the element based on their state or position. When I mean by state, what their current, if it was to be a human being, your current body temperature or something like that. So current state of being, I could use that word so that you could relate it more. Current state of being, if based on their current state of being or position, that is how you use your visual code. So I'm going to add up that we have added that if once you hover on this, you should have the background to change. I'm going to add another, so I'll use something like cursor pointer. Means that once I hover, my cursor should change to a hand. That means a pointer hand. So that's it. You notice that it works once I hover, my arrow is pointed, but once I hover on top a button, I get a hand click. So that's for the physical class. Then I'm going to take up another one, which is button focus. Button, button focus. Button focus. Once it's focused, give it a border, border, border of two, 2 pixels, solid, solid black. Let's say 10 pixels, so it could be very visible. So what happens? This I've hovered. When I click, I have it there. But it's not quite. Then let me use okay, let's try. um, so we have that there. Let's try more. Let's use more physical elements where you could see that very well. Let's say anchor tag and that's let's use an input. That means we are going to add an input to we're going to add an input to our CSS just for experimental sake. So use input. So for input, let's check out. We have the input. And this is how it works. So once I click on the input, then add a placeholder attribute, and add click me, or let's say enter move that text. When I move down here, you can see it enter text. So once I click on it, I have my. So I'm going to reduce it so that we could see that reduced in there. And once I focus, means once I focus, if I'm out, once I'm focused, you get the border radius there. So that's for the physio class. Physio class. So for the physio elements, we will use before. So I'm going to add something more visible. Let's use before. Okay, let's try this out of it and paste here. We have H1s before H1's content to be dashed dash. And we have that here. We have added a bracket here before every H1. All the H1 in our CSS has this. Let me enlarging this. So all the H1 has this styling. If we look through only the H1 elements in our CSS before has this. So that's how before was. You can use it to add up a styling. So you could ask, how is this thing is not on our is not existing on the HTML. So how come where is this thing being attached? That's how the magic works. So I'm going to do something like this. Add. I'm going to change this to after. After. So let's see what happens. Now it goes after the content. After the content. Why before the content, then after is after the content. So that's how this is being implemented for the physical element selector and the physical class selector. Then for the head general sibling selector, I'm going to add it up here. Let's look at what happens with that. Let's see before so that our work will be awesome. So we have that. Okay, uh, this is orange. Okay, so we see that all element that is we have it here. We have this effect here. Where else do we have such effect? Only there. So why do we have such effect? Now let's go to our HTML so that we have that where exactly so that we could understand better. Okay, on the head. So we ask that anywhere that there is a paragraph, any paragraph anywhere in our code that we have a paragraph immediately after a H1 should take up that style, to take up this color. That is what that's what is giving this that color. So let's change it to go to a more colorful orange so that we could see that this is So I believe we all understood that. That being said, I'm going to take a few questions. I'm sorry if you're having network issues. You could log out and turn back the call so that you won't miss anything. Then, for those who are on the call and you could hear me and you are following, drop your favorite emoji so that I could see that you are following. I can see that. Okay, thank you so much. Dollar sound is up. So I'm going to take three questions concerning what we just took now, what we just looked at, then we proceed. So who has a question? That being said, we have looked at selectors, types of selectors, on how selectors have been implemented, how we could do that on our own end without any issue. Oh, and I believe we could do that now. We are going to proceed to a major important thing in the CSS is the box model. A very important thing we have is box model, the CSS box model. Okay. If you are still with me on the call, can you drop your favorite emoji? There's no those that I believe network. I know network is very much beautiful and very handsome, and good is so pretty this evening. Network is so pretty and perfect. So thank you so much. Thank you so much for that. Thank you so much. I believe you are following, and we understood what we looked at, and we believe we have looked at all. We have been able to look at all categories of selectors. While as we proceed, we look at how to implement it. Remember, we have our projects to build, our single individual projects to work on, and we also have team projects and other group projects to work on. So that being said, we go over to one of the major and main things in the CSS, which is the box model, which is the CSS box model. CSS box model. I'm trying to get my screen back on. Another name, let's see the fastest finger. Another name for type selector is what? What is the another name for type selector? Type it on the comment section, the fastest finger. That is the word for that. Okay, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. To renew element selector, element selector, element selector. Oh wow, that's great. You guys are following. We have one, two, three, four, five persons. Thank you so much for that. Thank you and thank you. So while we pay more attention, we move over to the next thing. So we are going to look at the box model. What is the box model? Have you ever asked? You have always heard that images are made up of box, little boxes. That's why we call it pixels. Little square boxes makes up the image you see, the pictures you see, and you ask, how is this possible? Why is this possible? And with research and everything, you have come to understand that, oh, actually, these are small boxes. If you zoom an image, you zoom it to the fullest, you will see the small boxes that makes it up an image. Now, what if I tell you that everything in the on your website or on your any web page that you visit is inside the box? Yes, everything is inside a box. Your headers, your text, your content, and everything that you have on that is being displayed on your website is inside a box. That will take us back to the box model. What is the box? Since everything is inside the box, how does this work? How does this box work? How why is it important that we should know about it? Why? And why is it very much important that we know about it? So that being said, I'm going to move this to now. Every browser has, if you click on your function key of your browser, the function key of your browser, if you click on the function key of your browser, you will, on your F12 function, F function 12, that's F12, you come up with on your Chrome brings out your browser inspector, or you could go to the side and click on more tools, developer tools. It comes out, it goes in, you do the same more tools, developer tools. Once you click on it, you have it. Then if you are using Firefox, just with your F12 or the same way, go to your developer tools, you'll find your inspector. That being said, we go to the inspector elements, and now I said everything is inside a box. How? Now if I hover on this, you get to see everything inside a box. At every point in time I click, I have the box, even this box and box box, box, box. Now you ask why is it like so? Now CSS box model, when we look at CSS box model, we have boxes, we have box. But what does this really implement and how does this concern our CSS? Is this still part of programming or is this still, what is this being called? And why is it important that we should know that in our CSS? Now, in our CSS code, we have seen properties like background color, we have seen border, borders, we have seen padding. What is padding? How does it work? What is the difference between margin and padding? We say margin, we say padding. I know that yes, in a handwritten document, we already know when they say there's a margin space, have do not write on the margin space means you shouldn't write on that white space that is behind the line, your writing line. Now, if you ask how does it affect what we do, I want to explain this. Looking at the right hand side of my, let's do something like this. I want to be very much big. I want this to be very much big. Let's do this way. Okay. So that we could actually see. I want to reduce this, but I can take it down. So with the inspector, you're able to inspect everything you have with the styles and what have you. You could, that's a developer too. Use it to inspect styles. Okay, let's say I don't come into a site and okay, let's open an actual site. So which actual site should we open? Let's open our okay, let's open Medium and okay, let's what if we try let's open a Medium and um, inspect. So now I can, if you look through my right side, anywhere, this is the HTML of this page, and this is the CSS type. So if I click on the selector and I click here, this is the navigation of this. Here, this is the HTML code, exactly where it's located. These are the stylings here. If you can edit it, you can add some things, remove the stylings and see. Okay, I could increase here, I could say here add a padding. I need padding 200 pixels. To see the display, I could play around with the play around with the CSS of this medium, popular medium. If I open the Facebook, the same thing, every site has this. This is the content, HTML content. I could move around the HTML to see, okay, this is the navigation here. Then this is the, here should be the content. So let's say I think here, this is this here. Let's say, so you could actually inspect everything that you have on the site. You could actually inspect anything that you want. This, no matter how complex the site is, basically something. Which site is uh let's say, okay, let's check the IGM. Oh, actually, let's visit TEFEM. Okay, let's visit TEFEM's website, and so this is the TEFEM website. Let's inspect what this site is made up of. Here on the head section, we have the metadata. This is basically the structure of TFM. So I could do something like this. So I'm going to teach you a lot of stuff. So if I want to see the source of this, I could open view page source. I'm loading the page source, different page source. Let's see what happens. While it's loading, we could inspect. This is exactly what is on. So if I want to clone this guy, exactly what I'm going to do, we could inspect this to know, okay, which style did they use. I like what, how this is being positioned here. What do I do? How do I know? I pick up my inspector, come to this place and see how it's been aligned. I'll look at the CSS, that's animation. So it has a margin top of 100. So if I remove margin top, it's going to be this way. By margin left, it has mean that there is, this is a media query and something there. So can
Sorry, I
actually,
cannot see your screen, sir. I don't know if I'm the only person who's not seeing your screen.
okay, let me check it out. Okay, let's see. So I believe are seeing my screen now. So I said this is the TFEM's website. This is the mobile view of the TFEM website. So we want to inspect. Remember, we are talking about box model. So I also want to point out how the developer tool works with the inspector. So this is the TFEM website. This is the TFEM website, and lots of pictures, memories, and all that. So how can we do something that looks like this? So I like how this is being this hero section looks like on the mobile side. I could do something like this. Think about this, the mobile phone size of this. Choose media query, but when we come to media query, we look at that. So let's see if I could. Um, let's take it down. Let's see. Let's see. Let me reposition this down so that we could downside. Let's see this. So now we could see elements and styles. So we are building a site. We came to the site and we want to see. Let me reload this. So if I'm to build exactly defense website, I want to clone this website exactly, and I don't want to recode it. What I will do is come to the source here and view the HTML. This is the HTML of the home page, TFEM's homepage. So you could how to bring it out. You right click and go to page source, view page source. Once you click on view page source, it opens a new tab with the source of the page. So this is the entire page, the entire TFEM's page. Okay, let's try out something. Let's copy it. I'm going to come to this place. This is now let's just run through it and see how it's going. I'm going to comment on this so that it's not going to affect that. Come to this place, we are going to have a crash. Okay, let's try. We have an about us page. Let's try using the about us page for that. Okay, and paste. Wow, what happened? So let's go back to our code, our main size, and visit about us. What happens when we visit about us? So we now have this. We have exactly the same contents in the TFEM's website. We have it there. We have the HTML content, but we don't have the CSS. How do I get the CSS? I could come to this place and check here. This should be the main CSS. Main CSS should be style.css. I'll click on it. I have the CSS. So I just copy and copy, then come to my style and paste that here and go back to my own about us and refresh. What happens? Is it going to occur? Nothing changed much. That means this wasn't really okay. There's a change and how it was. Some things changed. Some things are now aligned well and all that. So if But basically, this is actually the hardest way of building a site, trying to copy whatever. You keep copying here and there, and you end up not actually getting anything. So the best way is just look at what they have, how they structured it. So this is their site, and this is the source code. I could actually learn how to pattern my work. So basically, what they did on their navigation, they used navigation, a nav item, and the station it well structured and well laid out. So you could inspect it later on, go to the visit the TEFEM website with your system, right click and view page source, or open your inspector and see how the code was structured and how it works. So back to what we have using this, like I said, everything is contained in a box model. So now I don't know how to zoom. I needed to zoom this. You see that I have here the contents I have here. If you could see this, I have the padding, I have border and margin. So then I have positions, and if you notice, if you notice that this, if you notice this has there is padding, there's border, there's margin, and these are properties, CSS properties. These are all CSS properties. These are all CSS properties. If you look closely, these are all CSS properties. So I said everything is inside the box. If look closely here, you have that everything has its own box, its own box. So now, if you look closely on the top side of where my cursor is, you'll find out that the blue section is the content section, while the green section is the padding. So here, if I go down to this place, so this is what I have. The about section, in the about section, the content is in the blue section. Then the green section is the padding. Padding is the space between the content and the border, while margin is the space outside the border line, while padding is within the border. So that's the difference between padding and margin. So, and we can see closely that this has a padding, this has a padding of 8. So I could, let's see, if we look closely here, this is the styling. We have, this has a padding of 8. I could increase this to 20. So I've increased the padding to 20, the padding top to 20. I could reduce the padding side to 300. I have it here, the padding size 300. So now everything in our CS, in our HTML, everything in the web page is inside, is contained inside a box. So coming back to what we have, it shows us that when we say we have inline level elements and block level elements, now every element is inside the box. So that's why you have the property of padding and the property of margin, whereby you could add space within the content, then add space outside the the content. Now, within the content, you have your padding, then a border. So margin is always outside the border, while padding is inside the border. So back to our own part of the site. Back to our own part of the site. We So CSS box model as applies to block boxes is defined on how different parts of box. So I explained we have different types of box. We have the margin, we have the border, we have the padding, and we have the content. So in like I mentioned, we have in every box we have the content, but let's start it in a hierarchy. We have the space, we have margin, let's say margin 50. So we have the fifty, margin 50. Then we have the padding, the border. Let's add a border left of 300 so that we could so a border of 30, and we don't have style. So let's add border. Let me add my border. Okay, add border. Okay, this border which let's add border. Okay, border and add border and delete 3 pixels solid. So now I have my border is 3 pixels. I can decide to increase it to 30. I have a border of 30 and the size here. I could go back to this place and add, let's say, a 10, make it a border of 30. Now, this is our border. Then outside our border, let's add a margin of, like a margin. We have a margin, we have our margin of 50, we have a border of 30, and we have padding. So let's add padding, padding, and give it padding of 20 pixels. Now we have the padding of 20 pixels. So that's the hierarchy of the box model. So I said every element has is is inside a box. So we have the margin, which is the first one. We have the margin, then we have the border, then we have the padding and the content. So whenever you are styling your CSS and you give a padding space, you know that you are giving a space inside the border line. So you can choose to give your border a color or you choose not to. So whenever you are giving a style, whenever that whenever that is whenever that you are giving a style, of border, you know, they're affecting, but whatever you're giving a margin space, you know that the space is outside the border. So the content box, we have parts of the box. The content box, the area where your content is displayed, which is the content box. This is your content box. Then we have the padding box. The padding box sits around the content box as a white space, which we use padding. This is your white space, which we use padding. That's the padding box, which using padding and the related properties for padding to give the space, the white space that sits around your content. Then we have the border box. The border box wraps the content and the padding. So this is your border. Your border wraps the content and the padding are wrapped inside the border. Then we have the margin box, which is the margin, which is the outermost layer and wraps the content, padding, and border as a white space between the box and other elements. So if we inspect this here, has the same thing. There's a margin, there's a border, and there's a padding, and there's a content. That's how every element has this design. So that's for box model. So anytime any content that is being displayed on your web page has this box model, the margin, border, padding, and content. Margin, border, padding, and content. That is how. Then whenever you are adding a CSS style, if you want to give a space between your content and the border, you now know what to use. You use your padding properties. So if you want to give a space outside the border, you use your margin properties. That's how to do that. That's for box model. So we have played around with box models, played around with different size, different box model. We have played around with different site box model. We looked at how it works and see the beauty of it too. You see that this is how it's being displayed. So that being said, I'm going to take questions now and clear up our thoughts on box model and border. So border is a property and have other related properties for border, which when you type border in your CSS, you use border in your CSS, you have different border. You have your border radius, border bottom, border color, border top, border left, width, border width, border height, border style. These are related, just like the same way you have your padding, you have the same thing for padding, you have the same thing for padding. So the same thing goes with your margin. You have your margin top, margin right, margin left, margin here, margin there, and the same thing with padding, the other related padding properties. So I mentioned padding sits between the border and the content area. I also mentioned that the margin is the space, the outermost space, which is outside the border, Then we have margin related properties. We have the margin top, margin left, margin bottom, margin right. So we have that. Then like just like what you have on your manual paperwork, you have that margin space, margin space are outside the where you, if you are writing, they say do not write on the margin space. That's outside your, but that's the same way it happens in web development. Then your padding space is between, is inside the border, and it sits very around the contents that you are writing. Then we also talked about the borders. The border drawn is drawn between the margin and the padding box. Borders just like border between a, just a line between a country and another country, or a state and another state. That's the same way. Say, okay, this is the border demarcating in Nigeria and Togo or Cotonou or wherever. Okay, so that's the border. The same way border applies to real life, that's the same way border applies here. It differentiates between the margin and the padding. Then we also talked about the padding and all these related, which we have the padding top, padding right. Since is a box has a left, right, top, and bottom, so that's the same way you are able to style the left side, right side, the top side, and the bottom side. Then we could also we could also we could so so the most of all you need to understand about the box model is that everything is inside a box, and the space between your content, the very space that surrounds your content is called the padding. And if you want to give a space between your content and another content, you can use your padding space or your margin space. So if you want to give, if you have a border just like a button and you want to style, give a space between the button content and the border of the button, you use your padding. Once you want to style something within the border line, you use your padding. Then if you want to style something outside the border line, you use your margin. So I will encourage you to go and check out the margin related properties, padding related properties, and the border related properties on CSS. These are the three aspects I would like you to look at. So the next time we meet, we'll implement it in our project that we are working on. Since now we know how to, I'm going to drop the link for the assignment for to the Figma file of our project. Look at it. We have learned how to add images. We have learned CSS, how to add CSS to our website. We have also looked at CSS selectors, and we also looked at box model today, and looked at box model. We also looked at padding. Under the box model, we saw how the hierarchies of the boxes we have in each element. We learned that there is margin. After the margin, there is border, there is padding, and there is your content. So whenever you're styling, and you can style your padding, you can style your border, and you can style your margin. And we say that we have margin related properties in CSS. We have border related properties where you have border right, border radius, border this, border that. We have the padding related properties where you have the padding top, padding right, padding left, padding bottom. And I said we should check it out, learn more about the padding related properties, and learn how to implement it. Is very easy. Like I said, use the, use your idea about how things work traditionally. When I mean traditionally, in the real life, to apply it to how what you are trying to do on CSS, it will work. With the basic understanding of what that happens in real life, use it, it works very well. You cannot understand programming without relating it to real life aspects. So that being said, I'm going to take questions for tonight's class. Then we call it a day. Then I'll drop the assignment. I'll drop the link to the Figma. You add your code. I'll also drop, okay, I would have dropped a link to the GitHub for the project. You could clone it. And but since we have not learned how to use GitHub, we will stick to that. I'll send the Figma link. Go through it and add images. Download the images from the Figma and add it on your code. And with the knowledge that we have learned so far, implement it on your code. In the next class, we are going to preview it before we proceed with any other thing. So the floor is open for questions. If you have questions, if your network is bad, you could drop it on the comment section, or if your network is very clear, you could unmute yourself. You raise your hand. Once I identify you, you unmute yourself and you answer, you ask your question. That being said, do anybody have any question? Do we have any question? Any? Okay. That should be Adula. Question.
Please, good evening.
Yeah.
Sorry, please, I wanted to ask, when you are doing a CSS page, do you have to add the four contents you mentioned, which is margin, border, padding, for your content? Do you have to add it to the whole page, or is just to specific elements in the page?
All right. Thank you so much. Like I said, every element has a box, is inside the box, and every box has a margin, a border, a padding, and the content. So depending on what the styling that you want to put, if you want to give a space, you don't want your contents to be touching the edge of your browser, you could either use a margin or use a padding space for that. Do you understand? So it's affects every element. Every element in your page has a is inside the box, which has the margin, border, padding, and content. Just like the way your from your body elements down to the list element in your website. Do you understand? Do I answer your question? Did I answer your question?
Yes, please, you answer the question. So that means, in conclusion, we don't necessarily put the key elements for all of the elements. Sometimes when you just design your web page, that means every element automatically has it, but you kind of edit it. Is that right?
Yes, every element has a box and it's all zero. It's all zero, zero, zero until by default it's zero. When I shared my screen, you have at it. You have a zero, everything the border is zero. Once there is, you haven't added a default style. The default box model setting is zero, zero margin, zero padding. There is the border is not visible until you now have to add. The reason we are learning about it is to have the idea that there is a box, everything belongs to the box, and you have the power to increase the space within the content and the border, and between the whole content and the edge of your browser using margin or using padding. You could do a lot of things just by having the knowledge that everything is inside the box and you have your padding, your margin, and your border. So that is that. By default, everything is zero zero until you add whatever you want to add. Though sometimes you write what we call a CSS reset, where you use your universal selector and say margin zero, padding zero. By default, that means every element goes to a padding of zero, margin of zero, except you now add a specific padding and margin style to any element. Aside that, every element has it goes to zero because of your CSS reset using your universal selector. That's basically one thing you do with your your universal selector is to write a reset, set everything to margin zero and padding zero. Looking at the examples that we have and the article that I sent to you, you see there that you have a margin of zero and padding of zero if provided that you have checked out the selector, the article on selectors. Thank you so much. I believe I've answered your question. Do I have any other
Thank you
question?
very much.
Thank you so much. Any other question? All right, Favor, go ahead. In the absence of question, I believe everyone understood what we learned tonight. Those that have network issues, sorry, you could watch the backup video, recorded video of the section and understand more. The research on the not assignment, I ask you to check it out and understand more on the box model. Hopefully, I will try to come up with an article on box model this weekend. Before the weekend ends, you get an article on the box model so you could read more and understand more. And that being said, I encourage you to use what you have learned so far and practice it on your individual projects. I will drop the link this night to make sure that everybody gets the link to the Figma. You can start working on your individual projects, which I will still in our next class with the knowledge we have now. We will update our project homepage to up to date to where what we have learned. That being said, okay, Schneider, hand is raised up. Go ahead.
Sir, please, so I did not get the assignment the last class, so I was a bit confused. I even wrote a message in the group, but since then nobody has replied.
Sorry, since your network is bad. In the absence of that, I think our network is bad. I believe we've learned a lot. Go through what we have learned. Go through what you have jotted. Okay, Riska, go ahead with your question.
Okay, I think she was asking about.
I also want to clear if there is an assignment, because I'm not going to even lie. Sometimes I get confused. If sometimes there'll be network problem in the class. Sometimes I'll miss the message on Telegram. So continue from my question. I wanted to confirm: is there an assignment? Also, this Figma thing you mentioned, I don't think I really got it. You said something about projects. My network has been a bit shaky. So if you can just explain that, I would really appreciate. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. Okay, during our first class, we started working on your individual project for this program. I decided to help you out while during the class we will use the homepage of your project as our class work and teaching so that you could learn how to build the foundation and have it that when it's time to start up with your individual project, you won't have problem starting up the code. At least you have been able to walk around the homepage, at least have the basics CSS design, styling, and everything, which you could also implement it in other pages that has the similar design styles. That's for that. So the Figma page is where you have the design for your individual project. Though for your capstone projects, we as the information for that will be related to you when the time comes. That's for tonight. There is no assignment. There is I only ask you to check out, go and research on margin related properties, padding related properties, and border related properties. Get to understand it very well and get it. That's the only assignment. And I also said that it's not an assignment, it's an encouragement. And also said that you should go once the link, Figma link is dropped. Check it out, update your own code, your own projects you have on your systems and devices up to date to what we have learned. You have been taught how to update, add images to your website. We have been taught how to also taught how to add other CSS properties. We have discussed selectors and many other CSS to update your project. That's, that's what I said. Abigail, do you have any question?
Yes, sir. Good evening, sir. Please, concerning the I'm sorry, please, to draw you back again, but I want to be sure I understood what you were saying earlier. You said we are to update the code you've been teaching us with. Is that what you're trying to say, sir? Using the Figma file, because I'm not sure I understand the assignment.
This is not an I said update. We have been working through the course during the class section. I created a folder and created a group, created a folder. We added all the content, HTML content that is meant to be on that homepage of our project. Then I've created a CSS file, linked it. So by default, we all should have linked our own. I also created how to add. We also learned how to CSS properties. So with the little that we've learned so far, I said update your code on your own device. I can choose to ask you to present what you have so far on your own part, so that if you start implementing it on your own part, you will actually have questions to ask. You will also have things, challenges that you might meet up, and you will ask, okay, I tried doing this and I couldn't get this outcome when I did use the see the code I used, something like this. What I'm actually saying is that you should start practicing what you have on Figma while we update it. In our next class, the next time we meet, we will update, add images. We'll do that. But that being said, do it before the class so that you could check out possible challenges that you might face up when working on your own project by yourself, and learn so that you could ask questions. That means if once there is an assignment is being dropped on the group, on Telegram group, there's a channel for assignment announcement. You get there, you always see any assignment that is being given. So every other one, the last assignment during the last class, I said it was a bonus assignment. So that was why there was no description. I just said, go and check out. When you come back, a bonus assignment. That was what I said. Now, tonight's own, I said, go and research. It's not an assignment. Go and research. It's research on what I've said so that you could know more. Not when we start working on it, you start acting, get confused. Instead of getting confused, at least you have seen it, and now when you see how it's been implemented more than this is the first time you're getting to see it, you keep getting confused. Like I said, it's I don't say that it never gets easier, it gets more interesting. So that's the word I have for you tonight. It never gets easier, it gets more interesting. So the more you advance, the more interesting it becomes, but it never gets easier. So that's that. Check out for group for always time to check the group for announcements and assignments to be up to date and instructions, and also take time to watch the recordings, go through the articles to understand more, to help you to understand more better that way. Thank you so much. I don't think anyone else has. So that being said, as the junction, I'm going to draw the curtain for tonight. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining. Thank you for sticking around. Thank you for contributions. Thank you for and have the time and have a wonderful weekend and enjoy the rest of your evening. To research more, keep an eye on the group and the link if you have not checked out for the selector, the article on the selector, check it out. You understand better written, and there are some examples too there. You can test run it on your own device and understand more. That being said, thank you so much. Good night, and I hand over the microphone to Lucy. If Lucy is not here, Victory, you can take over and give the remaining announcements. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, sir.
Please, if you know you have not signed the attendance, kindly sign the attendance, please. Abigail, your hand is raised.
Yes, please, Victory. The attendance form is not working. I've been trying since the first time you dropped it. I don't know why. It keeps saying refusing to connect. I don't know if any
Can
other
you hear
person is
me?
the same. Yes. Can you hear me?
If you have any question, just drop it on my network is very bad. Good night, everyone.